Hello and welcome to day 2 of the Engine Performance Expo. My name is Joe Costello, joined by Lake Speed Jr., and we are rolling on what has been just an unbelievable avalanche of knowledge in the engine building arena. Lake, day 1, spectacular. Day 2, we're going to try to elevate.
I'm not sure how we top yesterday. I mean, we had Warren Johnson, John Kazi, John Calley, Scooter Brothers in the house. Of course, Scooter's back today. And
yes.
So, you know, that was really, I mean, Roy Johnson, yesterday, epic. I mean, a drag racing legend just sharing his heart, that emotion. I mean, that's real. I mean, I don't know how we get better today, but we're going to try.
Yeah, we are going to try. And welcome to everybody watching on EnginePerformanceExpo.com. Remember, throughout the day, there are going to be some opportunities for Q&A. And speaking of elevating, like, that's one area. I want more questions today, guys. Mm-hmm. There are people out there watching all around the world. That's what this is for, live interaction. So when we call for questions, fire them off. There's no such thing as a bad question. No. And even if it's just a terrible question, we'll make good out of it. Absolutely.
Exactly,
because, well, a bad question. There are no bad questions, but something that might seem like it's a bad question can lead you to the right answer anyway, because that's the whole point of this. And everybody that's watching on NHRA.tv, maybe they're not machinists, engine builders, but they're fans of drag racing.
Or they're a racer themselves and they want to go faster.
What they saw yesterday was just unbelievable. An hour with Warren Johnson, an hour with Roy Johnson, and we uncovered so many important elements, like keys to stories that we didn't know at the time. Like, how did Roy and Alan Johnson dominate at Bandimere Speedway? Like, why did that happen?
Happy accident, the wrong gear ratio, that actually ended up being the right gear ratio. And who'd have known?
We would have never known. I mean, I'm sure some people knew. Right. You knew. And then I stumbled upon it, and here we go. So we got another big day, and it's going to be great. And of course, we're going till like 6:30 tonight.
Oh, yeah.
We don't expect you to watch every second all day long live, but what we do expect you to check back in areas that you're interested in.
The whole schedule's online, so you can see what's coming up, so you can find the segments you really want to watch. And, I mean, like I said, yesterday, the information was so good. I had some thoughts this morning. I mean, when John was talking about what Leonard Wood told him about, that, hey, 500 RPM before your power band makes a difference. And then you couple that with the fact that what Warren said about a carburetor, it always follows. Listen, I'm already telling you, I was thinking this morning about that. Me, Dad, hey, on the way back home tomorrow, I'm calling Dad. We're talking about some things with carburetors and pipes on the engines, because there's something there. So this is what this is all about.
That's what it is.
Is finding these nuggets of information you can pull out of these conversations and then apply it so that you can go faster and make more power. That's why we're here. That's what today is all about. And again, I'm pumped up about what we've got. We got some really cool features coming today. 3D printing is coming this afternoon.
Yes.
We're gonna have the part supply roundtable so we can really address the things that are happening. So this is cool. It's exciting. Yesterday was really great. We're gonna try to do even more today. And like you said, it's on demand. If you can't watch now, you gotta go do something else. That's fine. Come back and watch it later. I think there was more people that watched it last night than watched it live. So that's the great part of it.
Absolutely. And for those that don't know, the National Hot Rod Association is here in town this week. The Thunder Valley Nationals at Bristol Dragway, part of the playoff system, the countdown. So we got a lot of stars here. Tim Wilkerson is going to be in the house. The guy just won the U.S. Nationals, and he is going to come in. We're going to talk machining.
Right.
We're going to put him on the hot seat and pepper him with questions. It's going to be great.
We got to hit. I mean, Warren said you can't. If you can't build the engine right, then you have to use a power rider. So we got to kind of throw that at Tim and see what he thinks.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll have a great answer for Warren, because he's a sharp-witted guy too. Scooter Brothers as well.
Listen, that's going to be fun, right? I mean, me and Scooter talking. I mean, he's one of my mentors in this thing. I mean, these guys have made more opportunity for me than anybody else. It's probably Scooter. So this is going to be a really cool chance to talk to a guy that's been there, done that, and knows everybody and seen just about everything. This is going to be a lot of fun. And then George Bryce. I ran into him last night at the hotel, right? And we were just having a regular conversation. I was like, okay, ask him about that. Yeah, that.
okay, that, like Angel's first race, like just so many different things. So there's a lot of great entertainment and there's a lot of great information, and the videos that you produced throughout the day. And I just want to commend you once again, like all of these videos. Lake is out there, he's at the shops, setting up, shooting these videos, so much information coming at you.
Well, I apologize for the bad sound quality in some of them. I mean, we're literally in working shops. Like today, there's a video from Tim's shop with Jeff Jacobs doing aluminum block repair. They're literally between two races. They ran back-to-back weekends, and they were having to fix something. So the whole shop is abuzz with activity, and you can hear it in the background. So, but that's kind of the neat thing, is that it's not like we're going in a big Hollywood production and everyone's acting like they're not real.
Yeah, acting.
They're acting. No, these guys are doing it real. So, me and Ed and David and the guys from Rottler, we traveled the country. I mean, we've been to California and to Ohio and Illinois. We've been in these guys' shops, and they just let us come in. And we brought in a camera and we sat down and we just had conversations, real conversations, and showed what they were really doing. So, part of it is a bit rough, but it's also real. Yes. It's not polished, it's not refined. I get that. We're going to try to do better with some of the audio quality going forward. We're learning, right? We're not pros at this.
Right.
We're engine guys. We're not Hollywood producing people, right?
But he's overstating it. It's not bad at all. And if you want the information, it's well worth it. And if you spend any time in a shop, it gives you that feel, which I think you like. I ultimately think that you want that atmosphere. But in the end, not only have we received vital information, but how to acquire the information, which for me is applicable to my life, like as a journalist, as a broadcaster, as someone, how to think, how to approach a problem.
Oh, that's Warren yesterday,
in
right?
the way someone like Warren Johnson does. Well, it doesn't matter that I'm not trying to achieve a certain horsepower level. I'm trying to achieve a certain answer or a certain product. I can attack it the same way. And so, learn to overcome obstacles and challenges like a racer would, whatever you're doing in your business, in your life, in your home. Like, to me, I'm pulling out as much as I possibly can from this, and it has been helpful to me. I think that's why everybody's having such a great time with this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing I took from Warren yesterday was it's the why behind the what.
Yes.
You can have the thing, but, okay, why does it work? What's the how does it function? How do I repeat this? And it's that mindset that you have to have, a mindset that goes into this that will enable you to figure out, well, why did that work?
Right.
Once you know why it works, now you can begin to apply that over and over again, and you're not just the magic spring. We used to call it in NASCAR. Right? Every once in a while, you'd just find the magic right front spring, and you would go fast, but next week's a different track, and your magic spring may not work there.
And but the passion, to me, like the passion, he's like, why bother to wake up? Like, you might not think of Warren Johnson as like and others as a, like this passionate person, but really that's what it is. And at the end of the day, in our roundtable, and we'll have another roundtable discussion today, so like sit tight for that. That was just a thrill. But to hear him talking about the happiness of the life feeling of solving a problem, right? Of like figuring out why something works. Like, okay, this works. Well, what made that work? What's connected? What's it made of? What are the chemical properties? How do they interact? What's that material made of? Is there a better material? Where would it be? How would I find it? All of those questions, like, that's why he gets up every day, and that's why he's up at 4 a.m. every morning and working at 7 and never really works a day in his life, because every day he's chasing something that he's genuinely passionate about. And everybody that we saw yesterday, they're connected to that same deal. Like, they have this quest and curiosity.
I mean, that's the thing. Literally sitting out there in the waiting room yesterday, you had John and Warren and John Callies and Roy Johnson sitting at that table, not just at the round table at the end of the day, but at the lunch table all day, chatting with each other. And Kazi was like, that was priceless to be able to pick Warren's brain for 3 hours.
Yes.
And it's like, I want to be a fly on the wall. We should have put a mic on that table.
Absolutely.
and
next year we will.
Up what that was, because that was amazing. So, I mean, that's part of the thing we want to be able to do, right, is bring people in, share that knowledge, that passion, that enthusiasm, so that the next generation carries us forward and keeps building up and up.
And that's it. We have to spark the next generation. And they had said it, like, how do we get them going? And the answer is transfer of knowledge. For all the young people out there that are going down this road, there are people that want to help you. There are people that are, that's part of the passion, to help you along, and I think that's what this conference is all about.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to keep on going. All right, we're going to get started today. The first up, Tech 101, bore geometry. Embry is going to be back, who is doing a great job behind the scenes. He's in a lot of these videos. Embry Eric doing a great job, and pretty important.
Oh, bore geometry is huge, and Ed Kielber and the guys are going to talk to us about it. Hello, I'm Lake Speed Jr., along with my buddy Ed Kielber from Rottler, and here at the Engine Performance Expo. If you've been watching any of our videos, you already know that we love some ring seal soup. Now, ring seal isn't just the piston. It's not just the piston ring. It's not just the cylinder. It's not just the oil. It's all of them working together. Kind of like you go to dinner, you order a steak dinner, well, the steak's a steak, and your potatoes, and your broccoli's a broccoli. They all may be cooked, they all may end up the same plate, but they all don't work together. Ring seal, it has to work together. That's why we call it ring seal soup. Now, Ed, one of the chef's secrets about ring seal soup is that cylinder. Because for that piston ring to contact the cylinder wall and to seal against it, that cylinder wall might need to be straight, might need to be round.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit more about that, Ed.
Yep. So that's one of the critical things in cylinder wall honing, or cylinder honing, is to create a round cylinder for the ring to touch 360 degrees in order to seal. And there are many different factors or variables in that roundness. And you know, one of them happens to be the amount of pressure you put on the cylinder walls, and the other one can be how many stones I have in the hone head. And one of the things we did at Rottler early on, probably 10 years ago, is we took a couple of dart blocks that have a, very robust, good thick cylinder, no distortion,
right?
And honed them in the free state, and then sent them to a company up in Michigan that makes pat gauges or incometers.
Right. So explain real quick what a pat gauge or an incometer is, and how that's different than our favorite handy dandy dial bore gauge.
Absolutely. So a true roundness checker checks on the center of rotation, and that gives us true roundness. So you have an incometer or a pat gauge, and it goes in, and they're very specific to the diameter that you're trying to measure. And so it will actually rotate on the center line of rotation to get a true roundness for you, not a size like a dial bore gauge will do.
Because it's giving you
2-point contact.
Right.
You'll never check true roundness with a 2-point contact.
Because it could be the same measurement here,
right,
there, and there, but in between they could be looking like a Z.
Exactly. In fact, it's a pretty eye-opening experience to actually see a graph plotted out of a cylinder after you've honed it.
Make you feel really bad.
It'll make you run like your hair's on fire, because it's a pretty scary looking proposition. But we're talking microns now.
Exactly.
40 millionths of an inch. So it's all representative, but it's a great way to check and see what kind of true roundness you can get out of a cylinder hone, or a hone head, depending on the amount of stones that's in the cylinder or the hone head.
Right. So one of the things, and we talked about this in some previous videos, and we, at Total Steel, we're pretty big about doing light tight checking. So you can go in there. It's one visual way to see how is that contact all the way around. But like we were just talking about, okay, that only checks at that one location.
That's right.
So the bore is round to the ring at that location. But as it travels up and down, and as the engine sees heat and distress and all this, it's going to change. Now, let's talk a little bit about what things, besides heat, can actually affect bore distortion between it being in the hone and it being fully assembled.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, so what we did is that we went ahead and checked different hone heads for the amount of stones. So that gets us our roundness. We know that. But now what happens is now we're honing a cylinder wall that may be 200 thousandths thick in one place and 100 thousandths thick in another place.
Okay, yep.
It may be supported on one side and unsupported on another side. And then we add the distortion that a cylinder head being bolted onto a block, or a main bearings being bolted onto a block, depending on if they're torque to yield bolts or your standard old bolts.
Right.
So there's all these variables that will cause, once we know we can generate a round hole,
right?
We still have to try to machine it in as close a state as it is to running in order to try to keep a round, straight cylinder during operation of the engine.
Right, because you can hone, make it round, while the block is, we said, it's free state, where there's no stress induced on the block by the clamp load of the fasteners, like you said.
Right.
Main studs, and then heads being bolted on, all that creates stress, distortion, that can make what was round not round. So before we get into how you compensate for that, let's talk a little bit more about roundness and what you guys saw and learned going from 2 stones to 4 to 6 to 8, and just a little bit more about roundness and what the hone head what role it plays in that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we did, we didn't even check a 2-stone hone head, because we don't manufacture 2-stone hone heads.
Okay.
We started 4.
All right.
And again, we were trying to use the exact same process. So we used our new H85 cylinder hone along with dart blocks, and we would hone same pressures, same speeds, same feeds, same abrasives, hone with a 4-stone, a 6-stone, an 8-stone, a 10, and a 12.
Right.
And so we saw the greatest improvement, I'll say, between 4 and 6.
Okay.
That was the largest percent, if you were looking at it over the...
On a percentage basis, 4 to 6 was the biggest gain of the curve.
Biggest decrease, I guess, in out of roundness.
Okay, got it.
From 6 to 8 to 10 to 12, it was much smaller. And so you have that law of diminishing returns.
Right.
Because each time we go up in abrasives, the hone head goes up in price.
Got it.
And
more abrasives as well.
Exactly. Yes. And the other thing that happens in our business, most shops aren't doing one-size bores. They might be doing a 3-inch bore to a 4-inch 600 bore. And so the more abrasives you get in a hone head, the less range they have.
Okay.
And so in a typical hone head, a 4 or 6-stone hone head, we may have 300 thousandths of range per set of stones, or coolers and stones. In a 12-stone, you might need 3 sets to cover that same 300 thousandths range.
Right.
And so again, the cost becomes prohibitive for the normal shop.
Right.
So those are some of the variables, but 4 to 6 was the big difference.
Big gain in terms of just roundness and repeatability and everything.
Yep. I mean, we can sell any amount of stones in a hone head that the customer would like. It's not a problem. But we have found that it's just hard to justify anything over a 6-stone hone head. Not that there aren't points or applications that you could use a 12-stone. When we get into the Harleys with the really thin spigots on the bottom of maybe 45 thousandths wall thickness, you need more abrasives to dissipate pressure over a greater area to try to hone in a free state to where it doesn't actually cause that spigot to breathe.
That's a great point. Expand on that a little bit. That obviously, for it to hone, there's pressure being exerted by the hone head, and obviously with 2, they're 180 degrees apart.
Right.
They're pushing, but to get that same amount of load to work the abrasive, it's pushing really hard
in 2 spots,
which makes it want to oval.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah,
and when you get into thin wall castings, where it's going to want to move anyway,
it really accentuates the problem.
Got it. So by going to say a 12 versus a 2, now I can put less load in each area. Still, by mass, remove the amount of stock that I need to remove and maintain cylindricity.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Fun stuff. Next thing. We need to have more stones or diamonds. I mean, does it matter if it's vitrified abrasive or a diamond?
It does. It does. Diamonds will put much more pressure they take much more pressure to cut than a vitrified abrasive does, because a vitrified abrasive glue that's holding the vitrified abrasive is like a glass, and it shatters. And so you expose sharper particles more often with a vitrified abrasive than you do with a diamond abrasive. Okay? So yes, diamond takes more pressure to cut, and therefore we would like to see more abrasives in that hone head via, we don't make anything less than a 4-stone, and 6-stone is what we really recommend. That's going to give you the best bore geometry. I tell customers all the time, to take like a dart block, you're not going to see those big issues as far as the hone head generating roundness. Okay. Because they have a thick enough wall or cylinder that you don't see the bore distortion in aftermarket blocks. But if I bring in the old 350 Chevrolet, the grocery getter that mom and pop drove back and forth to the store all day long, and I want to make a race engine out of that, and I start honing with a 4-stone under normal loads, say 40, 50%, you will see at least about a half a thousandths variation, even in size, from the thrust side of the piston versus the pin. The pin. So this way, I'm going to be dead straight, and I rotate my dial bore gauge 90 degrees, and I may be a half a thousandth smaller there. Okay. And so I run across this with a lot of customers. They get into the habit of just doing this. Man, that thing's perfect. It's straight. But then I turn it, and they're shocked. They're like freaked out.
I can see that being a bigger problem in maybe production-based engines, especially aluminum block engines, where the OEMs have really tried to make the engine as light as possible.
Yes.
So this is probably more pronounced?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, what you'll see is I'll get calls all the time. A guy's got an aluminum block. It's got a liner in it. And, man, he's honing a nice straight cylinder, and maybe at the 2 o'clock position, 2 inches down, suddenly it's tight, and it's only a small area, and it's tight, and it's like, what, how's this hone head, or what's wrong with my abrasives, or what's wrong with my machine? Okay, that's the typical question. Well, it's not the machine, it's not the abrasives, it's not the hone head. You have an air pocket or a void back there that's not supporting that little section of that sleeve, and it's actually pushing out as the stones pass by it. Right. So it's not honing.
Got it. It's all kinds of fun stuff you learn every time you talk to Dad. Every time. So one other thing we want to talk about is obviously that geometry of motion, because of that. In that case, it was unsupported.
Right.
What other things going on to our torque plate? You saw it. You can see it in there, I'm sure. So yes, we're going to get the torque plate. Talk about the torque plate and why it's important to simulate that stress, that clamp load in the block.
Sure. No, it's all about roundness. Back to the same thing. The rings want a round cylinder. You were talking about light tight, where we shine a light underneath the rings, make sure that they're contacting the cylinder. Well, when you start torquing heads and gaskets and heads and what have you onto that block, it's going to distort that bore. And, you could end up with what we call a square bore, where, you're big, you happen to be big where all the bolts are at, or small where all the bolts are at, and so you no longer have a round cylinder, and you're going to have an issue with the ring sealing and trying to prevent blow by. So.
Right. So, okay, so the idea of the torque plate is to try to replicate the stress that's applied by putting the head on the engine. So, talk a bit about do's and don'ts of torque plate honing, some things that maybe can be overlooked or misunderstood because, it's got a torque plate on it, but things at first glance aren't always what they appear.
No, that's again, you're absolutely correct. So, most fellas will use a torque plate. It's a steel torque plate. It's 2 inches thick, and so you put your bolts in there and you torque it down and you hone it, and you think it'll be nice and round. You untorque that, put your head on there, and think that that's going to be the exact replication of the distortion, and it's not. So there's all kinds of variables in this. Number one is the material of the torque plate. Okay. Number two is your length of your bolts. So I see oftentimes fellas, there are torque plates out there that use the proper bolts for what you should be installing a cylinder head,
Right.
long, like on a small block Chevrolet, your smaller, your lower bolts or the short bolts, and then you've got your longer bolts. I've seen torque plates out there that just use all the same length bolt.
Oh yeah, I think we've all seen that.
Yeah, so that's a no-no. I mean, you're not replicating the clamp load that you'll see on a gasket or a surface by using different bolts. We should try at every opportunity to replicate exactly what we're going to do by bolting a cylinder head on there.
Let's pause there for a second because you just mentioned something called clamp load.
Yep.
Let's talk for a little bit about how clamp load is different than torque on the torque wrench.
Great. Yep. So all torque does is overcome friction.
Right.
That's all torque is it's to overcome friction.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons that you've seen all the OEMs go to torque to yield bolts. It's because they always struggled with clamp load.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I torque this bolt, I torque all these bolts to 80 pounds.
Right.
But my thread pitch or my thread finish or my lubrication all differ. And so I might, just depending on what you're doing, but let's just say this particular bolt had a great, the thread pitch was perfect, matched the threads, the finish was good. I lubricated the bolt, the threads, and the washer that goes underneath it properly, and I get, 100 pounds of clamp load.
Right.
Down here, I'm going to use motor oil instead of my ARP lube.
Right.
Or, my thread pitch is off just a little bit. So now, even though I've torqued both of these at 80 pounds, my clamp load down here is 20 pounds per square inch versus 100 pounds per square inch.
Right.
And so that leads to all kinds of issues, not only with bore distortion, but also gasket failures.
Right. So, talk a little bit about this clamp load and the lubrication part of it. Chris Radsky and those guys at ARP gave me a tour of their facility one time, and that's amazing. And we went into the QC lab where they actually have a load
Strain gauge.
They can measure 75 foot-pounds. What's the actual clamp load? And they showed me how they could take different lubes and get a 50% difference in the amount of clamp load for the same bolt in the same thread with the same torque value, 50% different clamp load. It was crazy to see, because what happens is we kind of think, you put lube on the thread.
Right.
Like you said, what's the torque? It's overcoming friction. Most of the friction isn't in the threads, it's at the interface on the flange. So that washer, that's where the lube needs to be.
Yep.
And like you said, if it's motor oil versus grease versus the ARP lube, you're going to get 3 different results in terms of clamp load. So the stress, the strain that block sees, what's distorting that cylinder, is going to vary by that process. And you mentioned something else. So we talked about, lube is important, but you mentioned something else. We're talking about torquing this thing. What about the pattern? Because you're not just torquing it down, you have to torque it in the correct sequence.
Yes, absolutely. Great question, and something that I had forgotten to address. But absolutely, you're typically trying to work your way around the cylinder to try to clamp it evenly. All that the bolt manufacturers, like an ARP, is trying to do when they tell you to torque in steps and use their lubrication and make sure you're lubricated underneath the head and the washer and all that. All they're trying to do is to even out the clamp load.
Right.
To try to eliminate all of those variables that a normal engine builder really doesn't have maybe time to think about, and he's just going through that thing, and this is all going to be fine. Well, the guys that know and have checked that sort of stuff have nightmares at night about that. and so it's all about, that's what the bolt manufacturers are really trying to do when they insist on torquing in a 3-step process and making sure you're lubed properly and using the right length bolts and torquing in sequence. All of that is to help you make rounder cylinders that seal gaskets and piston rings.
Speaking of gaskets, should you use the gasket, the same gasket that you're going to build the engine with, when you torque plate hone it?
Another great question. So I see all of these customers a lot of times, number one, they won't use the same bolts because they don't want to use those bolts. They're new bolts, all right?
Okay.
And number two is they don't want to take the time to put the ARP lube on them like they should, all right? And then number three.
So strike two.
Strike two. And then number three is they, I don't have an MLS gasket. I'll just put the composition gasket on there.
Yeah.
Strike three. Now, does it have the opportunity to run and probability? Absolutely. It may run fine.
Right. We all know you can hone the block without any of that and put the motor together and it'll run.
And it'll run.
We know that. Yep. The point of what we do here at the Expo is try to raise the bar. Because this is all the same things that the pro teams have been doing for decades. We're just trying to make sure that everyone doesn't know that, they do special stuff, torque plate honing, but it's the individual steps that get you there so that you can get the same result that they get by following the same process and same steps. Because it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, I checked that. It didn't look the same. It didn't look that different or all that better. But if you don't replicate all those same steps, you're not going to see the same thing. You're doing an apples to orange comparison. So you got to do all the right things and all the correct steps in the process to do it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about having the proper kind of torque plate, having the correct length bolts, correct lube, correct sequence. But you did mention earlier that the torque plate material. Why does torque plate material matter?
Well, really because of the stiffness of the torque plate or of the material, depending on what the molecular structure is of that piece of material. Mm-hmm. It's stiffer or more pliable than say something else. And so if I'm trying to replicate what the cylinder head does to my block, I want to try to replicate that.
So an aluminum head is going to have different stretch, compression characteristics than a steel head. So aluminum block engine, is it beneficial to have a aluminum torque plate?
Well, and you've had the opportunity to poke your head into some of the cup shops as I have, mm-hmm. and I can just tell you that those guys, they're not just using a 2-inch thick piece of cast iron or steel torque plate. They're using the exact torque plate that is shaped just like a cylinder head. In other words, if it's thinner on one edge than it is the other edge, that torque plate is shaped that way.
Right.
So they're trying to replicate that cylinder head on that engine block as close as possible. They leave nothing. It's how do you make 20 more horsepower? 1 horsepower at a time.
Exactly. I was going to say 2 horsepower at a time, but ones and twos is how you get to 20.
That's right.
No doubt about it.
That's right. And so it's back to this same thing. How do you seal a cylinder up better than maybe the next guy does? And it's all about the details.
Right. So hopefully y'all picked up a lot of details in this video. So stay tuned. We're going to answer your questions live.
From Ed and Lake on video to Ed and Lake live. Q&A session starts now. If you've got questions, put them up in the chat section. We will get to them on this show. Lake, you got a couple of flashbacks from that video right there.
Oh, exactly. So, I think it's a great kind of counterpoint or pairing to yesterday's video when we talked about surface finish. And we were really talking about how important that RVK is to hold the oil so that you can properly lubricate and seal the ring. Okay, so board geometry isn't that. Board geometry is horsepower. That's so that RVK, you got to have that till you have enough oil to basically lubricate and seal. That's the key thing. The more fuel you run through it, the more RVK you have to have. So that's surface finish. This one is board geometry. And Ed, you were telling me a story last night about a customer, how much power they're making because of the improvement in board geometry.
Yeah, it's exactly right. We had a customer, and I won't mention his name, but set up a new machine 2 weeks ago. And he wasn't looking for any more horsepower. He was strictly looking for automation and to save time.
Right.
And I mentioned that most of our customers are seeing an increase in horsepower.
Right.
And he said, listen, that would be great, because all he does is build race motors.
Right.
And they called yesterday and said they've run 3 motors over the dyno, and they've averaged anywhere from 8 to 10 horsepower
More than the previous
more
ones.
than the previous ones, and he's very dialed in. This is not a bunch of different motors. He builds a very specific motor.
He's got a package, right? He's the
got a
same
package.
package they build over and
Yes.
over again, so they know what it's going to do.
Yep. So that was great to hear.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and get back to that board geometry is such an important thing. You have from your head gaskets you're using, how you do the torque plate, the honing process. That it's all of that together is what yields it. I mean, you get back. Warren and those guys, I mean, they're not going to sit there and tell you all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But that's what they do, right? I mean, those are the guys that pioneered all this stuff.
Absolutely, it's implied, and every small detail added up together adds up to a lot.
Right.
All right, we got some questions. Here's one out there from Ed. This is a honing question. When honing Harley or other motorcycle cylinders, I always have to let the cylinder cool to get a correct reading on the unsupported spigot on the bottom of the cylinder. Many times, due to spigot expansion, I have to hone this area to keep it from being tight. Does anyone else have this issue?
Everyone that hones Harley cylinders has that very same issue. You are not alone there. What happens is that spigot is unsupported and it's very thin, and so it actually breathes as your stones go down through that portion of the cylinder. It actually flexes, and so it prevents the diamond or the standard abrasive or whatever you're using from an abrasive standpoint from actually honing the material. It just expands, and there's not enough pressure there to hone it. So that's a big problem. The more stones you have on a hone head, the better that situation is. You're dispersing that pressure over a greater surface area, and so you get less flex when you have multi-stone hone heads. So a 4-stone hone head is better than a 2, a 6 is better than a 4,
Right.
and so on and so forth. So,
Well, I mean, we visited one of your customers back in the summer. We were traveling around doing videos together, and they had actually made a fixture
yes.
that would actually support that area, so they could actually put it in the hone
Yes.
and then hone it without having to move because it was able to support it properly.
That's right. That's right. Now, it is important. You do not want to clamp that. I get guys that want to clamp that area, and that will really distort that bottom portion of the spigot on that cylinder. What you want is you simply want a round sleeve that you can slide that spigot in. You want
Not press
clearance.
fit.
That's right, not press fit. You want clearance. But what it does is just a couple of thousandths clearance prevents that spigot from that constant expanding while you're honing, and so it'll hone it much straighter that way.
There you go.
All right, next question. We've got another one. Thank you so much for participating with your questions today, guys. Rocky says, with diamond and CBN abrasives, pros and cons of using water-based coolant versus honing oil.
I get that question a lot, and there are pros and cons to both. Honing oil, depending on how often you're honing. If you're honing 1 block a week or 2 blocks a week, I actually prefer honing oil because it's less maintenance. If you're honing constantly, if the machine's running all day long, then the water-based coolant works very well. Positive to coolant is you get no heat retention. Water draws the heat away from an engine block. Oil insulates it, and so you'll have a cool down effect when you're honing with oil. But as far as surface finish goes, I've not seen any difference.
No. I mean, obviously, if you're using vitrified abrasives,
Right.
you can't use coolant. You have to. It's only a diamond and CBN, like you said.
Right.
At Total Seal, we really recommend the Quaker Cut 004 PE. That's the part number
Yes.
of the oil that we see that works really good for the shops that want to use oil.
Yep.
It works great with both vitrified abrasives and the diamond CBN. And like I said, if it's less maintenance on the hone head and all that, if you're not honing all day, every day, that's a product we think works really good and seen great results with.
And completely agree with you there.
Yeah.
It's great stuff.
Keep those questions coming. If we didn't get to your question this segment, we'll double back next time around. Thank you so much for participating even more today. But we're going to continue on our journey with our next video as we are kind of going through the short block. And at some point, balancing becomes the issue. Let's check out the video.
What a day, what a day, what a day. Yeah, my brain is swollen. I've learned so much today.
They told us, don't start cars. We are not going to listen.